Welcome to Dance Data Project's round 5 of Global Conversations Behind the Stage. My name is Ellen Fitzgerald. I serve as Communications Manager. I am here with Liza Eintema, our founder and president, and have the distinct pleasure to introduce fight choreographer and stage manager, Jo Chalhoub.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So can you just start off and introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from Wisconsin. I'm currently in Wisconsin, heading to the Chicago area soon, which is really, really exciting. Yeah, so excited. I started as actually a performer in high school, mainly a singer, singing opera, singing choir, started to do some community theater things. And then once I moved to Madison in 2010, I grew up in Milwaukee, so I moved to Madison, wanted to get into the arts community here and sort of stumbled upon stage management and fight choreography. And for the last 11 years, I've been an independent contractor in both areas, working with community theaters, professional theaters in the area, doing some training, working with some younger like high school groups and mentoring programs and things like that. And now I'm here, and now I'm headed to Chicago. So that's sort of those things sort of found me, and as I figured out that they were really good fits for me, then both of them have become my absolute loves. And it's great how stage management and fight choreography can work so closely together. And yeah, they're both just great professions to be in. So I'm excited to do both moving forward.
We know that you have worked with Forward Theater in Madison, and on the website, it says that you are a stage manager for their monologue series, a teaching artist for their partnership with a high school, a full-time social worker, and an independent stage manager, actor, and fight choreographer. So that's a lot of different things. So how do you balance so many roles, and how do their skill sets kind of relate to one another?
So I didn't actually go to college for theater. I went for sociology. And at the time, a 20-year-old kid trying to figure out their major, I'm a pretty pragmatic, realistic person. So looking into my future at the time, I was like, I don't know if I'm really ready to like do the whole sort of theater hustle of sorts. So sociology was always something that drew me in. And so I got my Bachelor of Arts in sociology. I kept a minor in theater to keep those things sort of connected because it is a true love of mine. So for, the last 10, 11 years, I've been doing both. I've had a full-time day job as a social worker, and then doing independent contracts with places like Forward or other theaters in the area in the evenings and on the weekends. So it hasn't been up until recently where this pandemic and this great pause has happened, where a lot of us are rethinking, what we're doing with our lives and where we want to go next and all of those sorts of things. That really gave me the time to sort of pause and say, what do I want to do next? Social work it's a very difficult field. It takes a lot of your heart and your soul and your energy and your time. And after 10 years of doing that, I was looking for something else. So I said, well, what makes the most sense? And I was like, well, duh, theater, performing arts, come on, you've been doing it this whole time. Now it's just time to make that final push and really focus on that as your full-time career. So it was a big balancing act of bouncing around between the day job, the night job, the theater world, the social work world. But one of the most amazing things that has come out of that time for me is how much those two worlds interact with one another and how much you can learn you know, about the other one that can help each other, right? So many of the lessons I've learned, especially in my work with Forward, you know, they're probably the theater I work primarily with, and I play a lot of roles in working with their mentoring program with the local high school, stage managing different gigs for them. I work on their advisory company, so I have some oversight in the artistic decisions that are being made for the company. And it's really amazing, you know, the nonprofit theater world, much of the social work world is a nonprofit world as well. There's so many lessons to be learned there between the two in ways that you can find funding, how boards are structured, how the culture of your organization trickles down to the people that you serve, whether it be your clients in the social work world or your patrons in the theater world and performing arts world. I've learned so many lessons that have helped me be better at the other job. And at the end of the day, they're the study of people, right? And it's all about making those relationships and bringing communities together in a lot of ways. And so it's been an incredible decade of learning how those things play off each other. And, you know, being a social worker has made me a better stage manager and a better fight choreographer, and vice versa, because I'm learning how to communicate with different people all the time. And it just makes me understand better how to talk to anybody and how to, you know, conflict resolution and all of those sorts of things. So it's been such an incredible journey doing that, even though it's been exhausting, I will say. Doing both of those things at the same time has been very tiring at times. But what I have learned throughout that time has been invaluable to how I approach the performing arts and how I do my work with other people. And yeah, it's just been incredible. So now I'm really starting to focus on the theater career, making that my full-time focus, and really diving in, especially into the Chicago community that's so diverse and large and wonderful.
I want to hear about fight choreography. I want to know your background around that and how you got into it and what's required. And also, it seems to me, we just did a whole module on safety and appropriate boundaries, et cetera. There's some intimacy stuff around that, and there's safety stuff around that. So I'd love to hear how you got into it, what interests you about it, and what makes a good fight scene versus one that you're just kind of walking away from or like whatever.
My journey to fight choreography has been sort of a not a funny one, but just sort of a bizarre one, I guess. For many years, I've been a cast member. I no longer do it, but I was a cast member at the Bristol Renaissance Fair. And I worked with a military reenactment group that did a lot of 16th century English military reenactment. And through that, you know, we do a lot of sword work, a lot of firearms work, and it's all historical, of course. But at a certain point, we were really diving into the actual texts from the Renaissance period on like, how would people learn hand-to-hand combat? Like, what were the texts from that time period that actually informed those both stage fight and actual fight? So that's kind of where it all began. And so from there, you know, I did a lot of research in, you know, in my area, how do I learn fight choreography? What sort of, you know, conferences can I attend and classes can I do, and all of those types of things. So I've done quite a few classes through the Society of American Fight Directors, doing hand-to-hand combat, single sword combat, and firearm safety for the stage specifically. And, you know, from there, I just try to stay as up to date as possible on any new things that are coming out, any changes that are being made, and all of that sort of thing. So, and you know, if you want to become a fight choreographer, the options are limitless. There's
Really?
so many.
Really, do tell. This is fascinating.
You can dive as deep as you want to into the different skill sets that you can achieve. I mean, there's things like quarterstaff and single sword with dagger, and I mean, all sorts of different disciplines and levels that you can achieve, and classes that you can take, and ways that you can improve your skills, and all of those kinds of things. So I would love personally to get more involved in more of those different types of disciplines, so I can diversify sort of my own skill set.
That is so cool. Who knew? I didn't know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you actually went back to original texts and actually read what people were doing and what it would actually look like. Because as the three of us were discussing before we started to record, there are so many bad, excuse my language, wimpy, half-assed fight scenes. And I'm just like, I want to stand up in the audience and go, no, can I get in there?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And, you know, to your question of like, what makes a good fight scene? Of course, there's good choreography and there's bad choreography, right? And a lot of us can spot that a mile away. But I actually think that the more important element in all of those, in any choreographing of a fight scene, whether it's just a slap, like it's one thing, or it's a full, 15-minute with 8 different people and we're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. What makes a good versus a bad scene like that, it's more about the trust between the people who are actually doing the work. I mean, yes, you have to have a good design for your choreography, right? Like that's going to be very apparent if it's bad or if it's good. But you could have the most beautiful choreography on planet Earth, but if the people involved don't trust each other fully to do it, it's going to look bad. And so I've also taken some courses on intimacy coordination, to know how those things work together. And, even though I'm not an intimacy coordinator by any stretch, that's a whole nother skill set that I do not have currently. But how does intimacy coordination communicate with fight choreography? And what are the basic principles of those things that develop trust, that develop safety, that develop comfort, and that keep everybody on the same page so that you can create the most realistic and the most beautiful choreography that you can. So that's really what it comes down to for me. And so anytime I walk into a room, when I'm going to be, again, even if it's just a slap or if it's a big scene where we're rehearsing several times, I start off with, if there are things that you are uncomfortable with, let's check in. What are those things? Would you like to share those with the group?
This is so great. Yes. It's so important. Oh my goodness. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. And, for me, it's all about the communication. If you see somebody in the room that's shutting down for some reason, we need to understand why that is. Is it because you're just not comfortable with the choreography? Are you just not comfortable with being touched in that one specific place? Are you not comfortable with that person who's across from you? There's so many different layers to it. And I really try my best to come into any room as judgment-free as I can be and as fluid as I can be, to say, you know what, I had this like amazing thing in my head, but if that doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for anybody. I don't care how amazing that thing was. We can always change it. We can always do something different. The most important thing is that you are comfortable with what you're doing, because that is going to be the only way you can tell the story and do your craft the way that it's meant to be done.
I imagine that throughout your career, you have maybe run into obstacles or faced adversity in some way. So A, how do you deal with that? And B, has there ever been, any time a disaster has happened that had required you to kind of think quickly on your feet? We have heard many stories from stage managers that we have interviewed thus far in the series, where something went awry, but they kept on going, and the stories range from terrifying to funny, and we would just love to hear a little bit more from you about that.
As far as sort of facing adversity, and I will say, to answer part of that question and to sort of bring into focus my approach, at least especially in fight choreography, my approach is the way it is because I've been on stage and I've experienced those moments where I'm like, I am not comfortable. I do not like this, but I have no one to tell. And I don't want to get blacklisted, and I don't want to, all of these things. I've been in those situations and they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible. You feel completely forgotten in those moments. And if there's a way that I can approach the work where people actually feel like they have a voice, that's how I come up, that's how I come up against some of that adversity of people who, just have a vision in their head and don't want to focus on an actor's comfort, a designer's comfort and safety. Those are really important things to me. And I always try to bring any adversity or any conflict back to, these are human beings though. They are not your little props to move around the stage. These are human beings that deserve to be able to come to work, feel safe, feel healthy, feel comfortable, and be in a position to do the best work that they can do. And so I'm not going to stay quiet when those types of things come up and nobody's doing anything about them. That's how I face the adversity. I just kind of speak up, because so many performers, designers, stage managers, we all deserve better when it comes to those types of situations, because we're human beings and we're just trying to come to work and do our work the best way that we can. So that's how I tend to approach it. I'm not necessarily afraid to point something out, in a respectful way and in an appropriate way, but to say that's not going to fly because that's not safe. Clearly that person's not doing their best work because they're uncomfortable or what have you. We need to do better. So that's kind of how I approach it. In terms of disasters, let's see. I can think of a couple things. One, I was stage managing a production sort of at the big Overture Center here in Madison. And about 15 minutes before the show was about to start, the fire alarm went off. And this was a busy time of the year, and the Overture Center has several different theater spaces within one building. So the symphony had a show coming up, and we had a show coming up, and there was another show in the other space. And it was so, we do the evacuation procedure, and it's the funniest thing watching people that are half in costume, musicians with their instruments, just standing out in the road. And so, immediately you had to click into okay, what scenario A, what scenario B, what scenario C, what are all the plans and the adjustments that we have to make to hopefully get the show up on time. If we can't get the show up on time, can we do it 15 minutes late? If we can't do it 15 minutes late, can we do this? Can we do that? All of these types of things. Can we get back into the building so people can grab their personal items and all of these different scenarios. So luckily I was able to communicate directly with the fire department staff that had come in. It was the classic, somebody decided to make popcorn and it caught on fire. It was like the most classic, but then all these people, audiences are evacuating, everybody's out. So I was lucky enough that it wasn't a big deal. We started maybe about 10 minutes late for the show. We could still do everything that we needed to do. But it was one of those moments where it was like, how many different plan A, B, C, D to Z do I need to have in order to still hopefully make this show happen? Luckily, I didn't really have to do any of them, which was great. But that was one of those moments you're like, oh my gosh, like, is this place about to burn down? Like, what happens to everybody's stuff and the sets and the everything? So
and you're counting heads. Do we get everybody out of there? You know,
right. Luckily, I was not working on a children's show at that time. I think that would have created even more panic of like, these are other people's children. Like, you know, we need to make sure everybody's accounted for. And another situation as a fight choreographer, actually, or I was on the stage management team, but I was specifically designed to be like the weapons master of the show. We were doing a production of Assassins. So we had like 20 some different guns in the show, most of which were live fire guns. And so there's a scene where one of the characters wraps a handkerchief around their gun to like hide it. But then as it's wrapped around the gun, they fire it off. And then the next scene, it blacks out and the next scene starts. Okay. The actor hands the gun off to me. I take it from them. And the handkerchief is jammed in like within the barrel. And the gun didn't actually go off. So the actual gun is like halfway to firing. And I'm like, okay, this is not safe to have back here where people are like running around trying to get ready for the next scene, trying to do this and that and move sets and all this stuff. So I actually walked into the loading dock and was able to, I had about 6 minutes to make something happen. So I walked into the loading dock. I called the person on site to make sure that they knew what was going on. I had that person call Madison PD to make sure that like, if there was a gun not in the place it was supposed to be, nobody freaked out. And I was able to discharge it at that time and get that gun back to that actor because they needed it 6 minutes later in their like next scene. So that was a moment of like, I don't want to blow off my hand. I don't want to,
this is like training for life. I mean,
right.
Okay, let's talk about, I mean, that's fun stuff, but let's pivot from disaster to, hey, you're moving to Chicago. We gotta go out when you get here.
Please.
Tell us about that, and then tell us about any sort of exciting stuff you got coming up.
Again, I'll be in Chicago by the end of July. So looking at, you know, possible gigs and work for the upcoming season. And luckily, hopefully, you know, we're going to have live audiences. We're going to be open. We're going to be able to do theater again, which is just makes my heart so happy. I'm currently working on some stuff with Silk Road Rising, which is a small equity house that focuses on stories from the Silk Road. So anywhere from, you know, the Middle East through the Far East. I myself am a Middle Eastern artist and stage manager and fight choreographer. So that's a really wonderful place for me to be able to tell stories of my own heritage and work with a really fantastic group of people. So I am connected with them. There is another group that was just launched in March or February of this year called Medina Theater Collective. They are, again, very brand new. They are also focusing on stories from the Middle East and South Asia, and being able to really uplift Middle Eastern and South Asian playwrights and have their works done. You know, there are a lot of politics around being able to tell Middle Eastern stories on certain stages, especially Palestinian ones. And so a lot of the focus of this group is to really fight to get those things seen on main stages and really work with companies throughout the nation, really, but we're technically kind of based in Chicago, but throughout the country, to be able to get these works seen and to show the beauty of these stories and what these playwrights can bring to the table. So that's also something that I'm working on. I'm their sort of their company stage manager, and working with them on some different projects. And then, yeah, from there is a lot of collaborating and building community and putting my resume out there, getting to talk to folks. Yeah, and just building that community to be able to be a part of the arts scene in Chicago, which is so vibrant and so beautiful, and just being open to jumping into anything. And that's really exciting to me, is all the opportunity that's out there. So that's kind of what's coming up for me, and I'm just so thrilled. I'm so thrilled.
How did the pandemic kind of affect your work? Not necessarily the availability of work, because obviously it's probably obvious that there's maybe a lack of availability, but how did it affect the way that you thought about your craft? And is there anything that you would like to take into this next phase of reopening and the way that we're going to experience live theater again, that you learned from the pandemic in the future?
For me, there's a couple different layers to it. One being, and I've kind of already mentioned this, but the pandemic, I think, like a lot of folks, gave me the time to really figure out what the next step was for my life and my career. And a lot of that was setting the social work aside and diving into the arts full time, which is something that I hadn't done yet. So that in and of itself was a huge push in how I was looking at the way that I work in the arts and the stage managing that I do, the fight choreography that I create. I've been able to spend the pandemic doing a lot of education for myself. So many of the big conferences like USITT or the Stage Management Symposium, all types of things had to be virtual now. So in other years where maybe I couldn't afford a ticket out to New York and then the cost of a conference or something like that, now I could attend virtually from the comfort of my own home and learn a tremendous deal about all different disciplines in the theater world and really expand my view of what my specific roles look like. How can I better collaborate with other designers and other production team staff and other artists? So that's been incredible. I've been able to take, that intimacy coordination class, the COVID compliance officer training. So I have all of that under my belt. So I've really taken the opportunity to focus on educating myself, learning new programs, learning new stuff about what does virtual theater look like, because I don't think it's going away. I think there's going to be a lot more virtual content and in-person content that we're going to see in the future, because the virtual content makes it so much more accessible to so many different types of people that maybe physically can't get to the theater, can't afford the theater, can't all of these, transportation and childcare and all of these things that are barriers to getting that ticket and sitting in that seat. Now we have the ability to show those things virtually to a much wider audience. And that really excites me. And I don't know if the arts industry, the theater industry as a whole would have made it to that point have we not been forced to we still need to create our art. How do we do that? We can make it virtual. And now this whole world has opened up. So to me, that's really, really, really exciting. And there's so much opportunity in that. And then for me, when it comes to focusing on the way that I do my own work, so much of it for me is, I have a place of privilege in the room, right? either as a stage manager or as a fight choreographer, I am in a place of privilege and power in the room, whether I like it or not, right? So how do I use that to make the work, again, safer, better, more collaborative, more understanding of everybody's abilities and schedules and all of those types of things? Like, how do I access that position that I have in the room to be able to fight for better work environments? That's really important to me. As you know, I'm a Middle Eastern artist, but I'm very white passing. So like, how do I also use that type of privilege to fight for other BIPOC artists that are totally locked out of different types of work? So all of those things have been kind of circling around in my brain, and I'm really excited to jump back in to the industry with a fresher mind, with better education for myself, and be able to really fight for those things that are a long time coming, and to fight for better work environments and more equitable standards across the board. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I'm just excited to dive in, for sure.
This has been a true pleasure for both Liza and myself, and we are just so grateful for your time, Jo, and we wish you the very best of luck as you make the move to Chicago in a couple months here.
This has been lovely. Thank you both so much for your very thoughtful questions and letting me babble on for quite some time. I appreciate it.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much.
Absolutely fabulous.